Welcome to the Superstar Communicator Podcast of your hosts, Nick Simon and Susan Heaton-Wright. We're here to create intrigue and interest about spoken communication to empower you to speak and communicate with confidence, clarity, and credibility in all of your business conversations. We interview expert guests from all over the world. Listen twice a month to be inspired to be a superstar communicator.
We are very, very pleased to have the most extraordinary podcaster and guest today, who I feel honoured to know and to be part of my own personal network and my own personal board of amazing people, shining a light on what is possible when you focus on why. Amy Rowlinson empowers people to forge their own path to create a purposeful, sustainable, and fulfilling way of life. As a life purpose coach, author, podcast strategist, and podcaster, don't you think, can you imagine how I feel when I've got a guest like this on, with having every mare with our podcast? Hey, but let's, let it go. Amy's chosen mission is to gift a living legacy of inspiration, insight, and knowledge, and create long-lasting positive ripple effects. On her podcast, Focus on Why, Amy provides uplifting and relatable conversations designed to inspire listeners and to take purposeful action. Her new book, of which I was honoured to be part of her launch party, Focus on Why, Creating a Purposeful Way of Life, was released on the 24th of October, 2024. So welcome, dearest Amy.
Oh, thank you, Susan. I need to shorten my intro, I think. You're just like, hello, Amy. Let's have a chat.
Let it go. Let it go. Honestly, you need to say all of these things because people will then really understand. Tell us a little bit about your book. I've been trying to describe it to Nicholas today, but do let us know what it's about.
I've been trying to reduce how to say this in more of a nutshell, and it's really tricky because there's so many different layers to it, but I'll give it a go. This is a co-written book which spans generations. I wrote it with my grandfather, but he is no longer alive. How is that possible? Well, I found a couple of years ago, just after my grandmother died, a journal that he'd kept for 5 years as a prisoner of war. And when I flicked through that, it opened to a particular page, which was the 30th of September, 1942. And it literally said this: proposal to write a way of life, the need for a planned life to meet every circumstance, every facet of living. And here I am on a podcast at that point, the previous 2 years, saying, have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. And I'm thinking, this is pretty spooky. So yes, I have written a book with my grandfather all about purpose, and I have used sections of his journal to punctuate, to reiterate, to just team up with me and just say, look, this is a way of life that you can live. And yeah, we've done it. We've put this book together and it's now available. And it is a way, not the way. It is a way to create a purposeful way of life.
That must have been so empowering when you found that book, and also that it fell open on that particular day.
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny because it was just after my grandmother had passed, and we'd just had the funeral. My mum and I were going through her things, and there weren't that many things left, really. She's quite a frugal person, and she'd cleared out lots of things, and she just kept what was really meaningful for her. But neither my mum nor I had seen this box, which had a few of her precious treasures in it, of which this book was just but one. And so we were a bit taken aback, and we were still raw from the death of her mum and my grandma. And so I put it aside, and I knew it was there, and I all had what is really scary, not scary, spooky, serendipitous, synchronous, who knows. I'd wanted to write a book with my grandfather 2 years earlier. I'd had a session with, actually, no, it wasn't 2 years. It was just a few months. It was in the January 2022. I'd wanted to write this book with my grandfather. And then what happened is in April, my grandmother died. And then I found this book. So it was really weird for me to think that I wanted to write a book and I was just going to use the stories or just the recollection of the stories that he'd shared with me as a young girl about wartime, with life lessons hidden amongst them. And then to find this and then to be able to use his own words, that was, really, really incredible for me. So yes, it was emotional and it was also just really beautiful, to be honest. But I parked it because we were still quite raw about my grandmother's death. It was quite a sudden one. She wasn't expected to die. We were just about to celebrate her 90th birthday. And so that was a bit of a shock. So I didn't pick the book up again until December. And then I read it cover to cover. And it was at that moment in December 2022 when I realized, yeah, okay, here we go. Let's get writing.
What a gift that both of your grandparents on the maternal side gave you.
Yeah. I mean, they were there from very early on, and I share some of the stories of how my earliest memories are walking to and from the little shop in the village that they used to live in, and just sort of touching the tops of flowers and my grandma sort of naming them all for me and me with my little bag of sweeties on the way home. I mean, I can still picture it now and how she would just pinch the snapdragons to sort of open and close like they can.
Oh yes,
and
I love doing that.
And she would sort of pretend to bite my nose with one. It was just, there's little memories like this which are just so special. And so yes, I was very close with them. In fact I lived with them for several years when I was in my teens. My grandfather would go to my school and he'd go to parents' evenings. They were very involved with my life, and I am very fortunate. And it's funny, when you're growing up, you kind of assume that this is how every family is. And speaking with various people about this whole making of the story, I recognize now that that was a special relationship that I had with my grandparents, so that not everybody has that. And it really is something to treasure.
Nick, do you have things that you want to say?
Yeah, I was wondering what was your what inspired you to use those memories and the journals you found? What inspired you to kind of connect those memories and details into a situation of business, and how you kind of connected the two?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So what's important to me are moments, and it's about understanding how we can bring meaning into every moment of our life. And this is a mission that I'm on, to help people to understand how they can be more fulfilled. It's a Gallup have done a report, and it's been year in, year out, stating the current state of the workplace, and that many people are unfulfilled in their work. And when I say many, 77% of the workplace are unfulfilled. And I believe that the solution is to understand how you can bring more meaning into your everyday moments, because then you can connect how your work is making a difference in the world. And that is your responsibility, your individual responsibility. So why do I bring these stories in, these moments with my grandparents? Because it's about recognizing that every moment matters, and that the relationships that you have with people are at the core of everything you do. So it is about building relationships. And yes, that's with family, that's with your peers, your colleagues, your friends, it's with everybody. And it's about you taking responsibility for bringing that energy, that love, that friendship into these conversations.
Now, you've spoken a little bit about people at work might not be fulfilled because they don't have their purpose. Only this morning, and as we know, the live stream might be happening, might not be. But somebody I spoke to this morning was saying that there are a lot of people within the pharmaceutical sector who have been there for a number of years all of a sudden are being laid off. They might have worked there for 20, 25 years, and in some cases, not having an opportunity to say goodbye to their colleagues. And they feel they have no purpose because they felt their purpose was their job. What would you say to those people to support them?
It's very difficult when you're in an environment, especially for a long period of time, that it does become your identity, that your work is so much of who you are and what you're doing. But it's understanding that you're not your job, you are you, and that you have all these incredible qualities and skills that are transferable into another space. This liminal space of uncertainty is not a great one. I totally agree. It's uncertainty is not something that anybody is necessarily comfortable with. So it's about understanding that where you are and what you are then going to do next is your responsibility again, and that it's up to you to take control of what you can. And there is very little that we actually have control of, but our actions and how we respond to situations is something that we can control. So yes, we can't control whether a company is going to make us redundant or not. That is often something that is, not within our sphere of control. But knowing now what it is that you love doing, knowing now that what it is you're capable of doing, and that your identity is not where you were working or the job title that you were given, but who you are in your essence, capturing what it is that you are looking for next. It's an opportunity. There are always going to be obstacles in life. There are always going to be circumstances which are beyond our control. And that's one of the reasons I used my grandfather's story to share his journey, because he was confined in captivity for 5 years as a prisoner of war. There were lots of things that he was unable to control, but what he could do was he was able to learn, study, build his skills up. He used that time and the resources, and he collaborated with people through correspondence. He would write to authors, he would write to his parents, he would write to the University of London, he would write to pretty much anybody. This is something that he actually continued for the rest of his life. So he tapped into what he could. His library was kept getting bigger. The Red Cross were incredible. The International Red Cross were incredible at helping all of the camps to build up their resources for what they needed. And yeah, he studied for a degree whilst in the confines. He did watercolor, they put on plays, he wrote plays, and he honed the craft of writing because he didn't want to be an accountant anymore, which was where he was destined to be. That was the path that he thought he needed to be on to please his father. And his other brother was a doctor, and his other brother was in the army. So at the time he was in the Air Force. So it was very much a case of, what can you control? What can you do? And he did that. And so me using the growth from being in his very early 20s through to mid 20s, those 5 years, he learned a craft. And then when he came out, when he got repatriated and came home and the war was over, he then applied for various jobs. He wrote plays every day. He sent them away. He got many rejection letters, but he got a job. And I believe that is because he was very focused on why he wanted to do what he wanted to do. And he had that very clear purpose, and he took action about it. So yeah, that would be my advice in terms of answering your question. It's just about recognizing that there are always going to be circumstances beyond your control, but you can take action to affect what happens next.
And furthering on from that, how does business purpose differ to personal purpose?
So this is a really interesting question, because essentially every business is made up of people. It is an entity. It's a construct. It's an imagined construct that we all buy into, say, right, this is the entity that it is. But it needs people at the core of it, and a strategy at the core of a business for it to then know what is happening, for all the people who are in that organization to know where you're going with it. The purpose at the core of that is the why. So there are two elements. The purpose and the why are interconnected, but they're not the same. So the purpose is the overarching intention that guides the direction of the business. The why is the emotional significance that sits alongside that you assign to that purpose. So to buy everybody in, to bring everybody along this journey, it requires that emotional significance that they ascribe to. So it is that in a business, it's also that in your individual personal purpose. So they may be different. You may have reasons for your overarching intention that guiding your direction in life, and you may have a very different emotional significance that you're assigning to that as well. But there may be similarities, and this is where you can connect your personal purpose with that of a company. If it's your own business that you've set up, it's very likely to be more aligned. It's very likely to be almost very similar. And if it's a company that you're working for as an employee, it's understanding, does this sit with my values as well? Because it doesn't have to be that your purpose in life is done through your work. It could be that it's through other areas of your life, through your volunteering or your contribution in many different ways. So yes, they are different, but people are still at the core of designing these purposes.
With regards being in business, say you work for a large organization and you start saying, well, my purpose is, and we know that people are people and people have egos and get triggered by things like that. How would you suggest that people voice their purpose without rumbling other people's egos?
So the thing about purpose, I find, is that it's about, in essence, it's about collaboration, it's about contribution, it's about service. So I don't necessarily find that a purpose that has those elements to it tends to come with ego, because it's very much a case of it's a collaborative effort. It's not, you're not going to get very far in life if you try and go alone. And so from that perspective, the people that I've interviewed on the podcast, the people who are talking about what it is that they're looking to change, how they're going about affecting that change, and how they're looking to bring other people with them, it's a collaborative piece. It really is. And this is where the contribution of how we are going to be shifting this dial of many elements that need help in the world right now, whether that's from an environmental perspective or whether that's from a cultural perspective or from poverty, whatever it is that you're looking to tackle, whichever issue it is that you want to stand for, you can't do this alone. Yes, change begins with an individual, but it's about bringing everybody else alongside with you. So yeah, if you've got a purpose and you've got a big ego, I don't think it's going to last very long.
Go on, Nick.
You speak about reflection and with action a lot. What does it mean?
So it's a great question. So reflection is the why element and the action is the purpose element. So the practice of reflection with action is where in a moment you intuitively assign a meaning to it. And that can be an instant response based on your behavior, your experiences, your previous beliefs. A variety of things come into play for there. With reflection, you get the opportunity to assign a secondary meaning. So you can reflect on the moment of what's just happened. And yes, your instant reaction might be something like anger, but then you can reflect on it and you can think, well, actually, I'm going to assign a different emotional significance to this moment. And then that then subsequently affects the action that comes in your response afterwards, which is where the purpose is played out. So reflection is where the why piece is, with the emotional significance to responding to a moment. And then the response that you then take in the purposeful action then ensues. And this is how I believe that people can build in more fulfillment and purposeful way of life into everything, because what they're doing is they're actually not just reacting, they're reflecting first, and then they're able to see, how does this play into what it is I'm trying to achieve in my life? How does this moment actually help me to achieve my purpose, in essence? So the reflection with action is a practice that allows you to not just react, not just be constantly reacting to every moment that happens without even thinking. It's just like taking a pause and saying, it could mean that, but actually I'm going to choose it. And this is the conscious thing. It's a conscious choice that you're going to choose it to mean something else.
Now, I was obviously at your book launch last week, and it was absolutely incredible. When you spoke, there was an authenticity. It was almost as though you stepped into what I would call your area of excellence, almost as though there was a circle that you stepped into. And what you spoke about was everything was flowing from your heart. Are you aware of that? And do you feel that that is how you have power of purpose?
Yeah, it's really funny, Susan, because so many people have said very similar to what you just said about it just being so authentic and from the heart. I've been planning for this event for a long time. I've been writing the book for a couple of years now. When I stepped out in front of everybody, it just felt right. That moment felt right. I wasn't even concerned about speaking in front of 100 people or anything. I was absolutely where I needed to be, saying what I wanted to say to the people that needed to hear it and that had come to hear it. Something you said afterwards to me was that it very much felt that it wasn't about me, that it was about everybody in the room. And you felt that it was something that you could really ascribe to. There's something that you could just take away and say, actually, you know what? This is what I stand for. This is what I want to do as a result of hearing that. And many people have since taken reflection with action and gone on to put their purpose in motion, which is just music to my ears. I think what happened on that evening was there was no script. Yes, I'd had a plan of what I wanted to say. I had written a script, but I ditched it. I felt and trusted that what needed to come out of my mouth, and very much to the people who needed to hear it, especially also in the Q&A that I had afterwards, where that was an unknown entity completely. But the focus of my talk was on 3 elements that are etched in stone in the Victory Services Club reception. And that was about common treasures, memories of friendship, and brave deeds. And those 3 elements beautifully tied together the message that I wanted to leave and wanted to impart on that evening. And it's very much about the common treasures, the moments that we take for granted, the exchanges maybe of a letter between a grandfather and a granddaughter, or even just a small birthday card that you've kept many years, and just those little things. And then the memories of friendship, again, linked to that, but they are memories. They're special moments that you treasure linked to the common treasures. The brave deeds, that's a big one for me as well, because I spoke about both my grandparents, both my grandfathers. One was a professional soldier, and the one I've co-written this book was a conscript. And there was a big difference between the brave deeds that I share. And yes, I mean, one was at the Battle of El Alamein, and he was a commanding officer of the 5th Tank Regiment alongside Monty. And it was a pivotal moment in World War II. My grandfather I co-wrote this book with was in the meantime, he had surrendered and had been a prisoner of war for 2 years, and then went on to be a prisoner of war for another 3 years. He didn't want to fight. He was a pacifist. He didn't believe that this all needed to happen. And so very different parts of my makeup and who's influenced me and who's shaped me, who's in my DNA. And So yeah, it does just come from the heart, because it's just who I am. I just spoke from my story of, this is who I am, and this is what I stand for, and this is what I'd like to share tonight.
Oh, you're going to say something, Nick?
Yeah. What can be something people use to help them drive towards their purpose?
So I think the most important thing is to understand that you don't find it externally. It's something that you create and feel from within. And that was very much what Susan was describing, is it came from the heart, and it does come from the heart. It's what really matters to you. So understanding what it is that you care about, what really matters for you in life, and really capturing that essence of who you are. It's about stripping back the societal, cultural, familial influences that maybe you've taken on board. You've been brought up in those various paradigms, and you've taken them on, and you then realize that actually I don't need, or I don't feel that that's how I want to live out my life. I want to choose it, to live it my way. And when you piece together all these elements, you start to understand who you really are, and not what you should be or feel you ought to be. And who you really are. Sometimes a lot of people don't know what they want either. And so it's this whole first phase of my book really dives deep into that before you can go anywhere. So the first step is to understand what you can and what you can't control. The second one is to challenge the status quo, to really understand that whether you are living out your own life. I was guilty of not. I'd been swept up with living in London and living out other people's desires and expectations, and looking for that shinier, faster, newer, bigger, better version of everything. And then realizing actually that's not what really matters. And then, so then I spent the time to capture what that really was. And at that point, you can then go into the planning of how you want to create this purposeful way of life. But that first 3 steps, they are really, really key.
It's really interesting. I just want to go back to when you were speaking, because obviously this particular podcast is all about communication. And I know that some people who listen to it are doing presentations, or who are sharing an opinion, or who are pitching either for investment or to get the go ahead for a particular project. And you mentioned the idea that when you had your purpose, it meant that everything flowed. So how could you use that within a business context that I have just mentioned?
We connect. People connect at a level from a heart space. And when you have a rapport with someone and they see that it means something to you, they buy into it. So if you're speaking from the perspective of this purpose piece, and that is at the heart of the strategy of the business, and it is the meaning quotient, it's the MQ element of the business. So yes, it fits with the EQ and the IQ, but this MQ, this what really matters, it brings people and the planet to the forefront. So prioritizing that, and again remembering that companies are actually groups of people that are coming together. We want to buy into the ideas that have an element of stewardship, an element of what it is that you're doing to create a better future for everybody. And I don't just mean for the generation that is existing right now, or the people who are on the planet right now. This is about thinking, how am I being a guardian of the existing world, and how am I making it a better world for those who are going to come behind me? So I see this as a role that I'm playing here. And if you are speaking and pitching for business, or you're speaking to a company and you're sharing with them what it is that your business is doing to ensure that the next generation, the generation's children, and several iterations down the line are being cared for because of what you're doing today in your business, I think that would make a pretty good pitch.
And how does having clarity of purpose affect communication in business and life?
The clarity around understanding what you stand for and knowing your values is, I would say, the difference between day and night. It really is. I've worked with my children recently, and they're in their early 20s and late teens, so 19 and 21. And what happens when you understand your values, and these are the guiding principles that you are making daily decisions and choices, consciously or unconsciously, using these core values. Many people don't actually know what they are. And when I helped identify and articulate my children's values with them, they can then see how the decisions and choices they're making are the ones that will guide them towards where they really want to go in life. However, it also helps them to understand the decisions and choices that their friends, their peers, and other people make, because they can see that what is a priority for them is not a priority for others. And this changes the whole dynamic of interactions, of communication with other people, when you understand actually, so one priority might be sport, humor, commitment. Another priority or value might be service to others or fairness. And so when you know what somebody else's core value is, you can see how they're making their choices and their decisions and how they are looking to navigate their way through life. And it's just as a lot easier to respect them for the decisions and choices they're making. And I think that really helps in all communication to understand it's not that you're people aren't agreeing with you, it's just that they don't have the same priorities.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because particularly when you are younger, respectfully to you, Nick, you can feel that you want to join the crowd and be the same as everybody else, even if the values don't match.
I'm a bad case. I don't really feel that, but
Oh, but
it
maybe
depends.
you did when you were younger. You
Perhaps,
want
yeah.
to fit in.
Yeah, I think it's an important point, Nick, about fitting in. And you know, you've obviously been brought up very well in terms of you are confident in who you are. And a lot of that confidence is a gift, because it really is, because if you don't have the confidence to stand up for what you believe in and assert yourself within a peer or in a professional environment, then you know it does make harder for yourself. So for example, I use my son for an example. His core values are sport, humor, friendship, commitment, fairness, and authenticity. He had a few friends that had been invited to come to the book launch but dropped out last minute, and he was really upset, and I helped him to understand why. And it's because he values commitment, and he values this authenticity, and he knew that one of his friends had said yes but would drop out at some point, and it upset him. And I think that now, what we spoke about it, now he understands, because it compromised his core value, that was why my son got upset. And then so now when he's going to be communicating with that particular friend, he'll say, look, I know that you may not commit, that's okay. So he can now factor in the fact that it's not a priority for his friend, and he can manage his own expectations. So going back to that, Nick, you said you didn't feel like you had to fit in. Was it because you're confident in who you are?
Suppose so, yeah. But I know what I enjoy doing and that kind of thing, so I don't really feel the need to, the word be, prove anything to anyone else. That's basic principle.
And again, this is something that when you take it for granted, But that again is not something that everybody has the ability to do. And this is often the case when something comes naturally to you, you take it for granted that it comes naturally to everyone, and it often doesn't. And your superpowers are, you often don't even think they are those superpowers because they just come naturally to you, and you think, well, surely everybody works this way. No, they don't.
Before we go, and this is an absolutely fascinating conversation, but I'm aware how busy you are and how everybody wants to talk to you. Please, could you share 3 quick top tips on how you could start to find out your purpose in life?
Well, would one of them be cheating if I said buy the book?
Well,
I think
that's not cheating.
well, I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I have spent the best part of the last 4.5 years, almost 5 years now, speaking with people on the podcast. It's 432 episodes. This is data that I've collated, and it seems to be very much echoed throughout all of the conversations I've had, that there's often a catalyst that is pivotal in shifting people to want to understand how to live purposefully. I think the biggest point I need to make is you don't have to have a life disaster or a big catalyst for you to instigate to creating this purposeful way of life. It just so happens that when you've had a big event happen, that it really does give you a shift in understanding that this is your one and only life, and I really want to make more of it. So that's often the case, that it has come to the fore for those people. But challenging the status quo, I mentioned it earlier, is so key. It really is, to really understand, are you living, and do a bit of an audit, are you living the life that you actually want to live? Or are you just being swept up with societal expectations? And to then capture what really matters, to really understand how you want to fill your life. There's only a certain amount of hours in every day that you get to do that, and some of it may be spent working and other with family, but the rest of that time, what is it that you want to do? Where do you want to explore, or what is it you want to do, to really capture what it is you want to do? And yes, the service piece, that contribution piece, is a really big part of that, how you then fill those moments. And this is the big thing I want to say, is that we can so easily just fill in the moments, but it's so much better when you create fulfilling moments.
Before we finish, and thank you for that, it was quite something what you shared then. Tell us a little bit about how people can purchase the book.
Well, the book is available from all online booksellers. So you can go to Waterstones, Foyles, Blackwell's, WH Smith. It's also on Amazon. So good old Amazon will also be able to ship it to you. I had some issues right at the beginning, but it's now next day delivery. So yes, it's available from all booksellers, and that's across the whole world.
And what is it called? Just so that we know.
The book
Focus on Why.
Focus on Why, Create a Purposeful Way of Life, Amy Rowlinson with George Fleming Kerr.
And I hope that everybody listening and watching is going to purchase that. And I will make sure that there is a link so that you can grab that.
And what I love, Susan, I just love people to reach out to me once they've read it and just share what it is that they're going to do as a result. I've said this before. I don't mind if you don't like the book. If it just instigates some reflection with action, and you then go on to create a purposeful way of life, for me, that's mission accomplished. Obviously, I'd love it if people enjoyed the book, but it really is important for me to shift that dial of the 77% of the world who are unfulfilled, because according to Gallup, that is what John Clifton said it last year, who's the CEO of Gallup, that this low productivity is a problem. so much of a problem that he sees it as being the difference between success and a failure for humanity. So let's shift that dial and start creating a more purposeful way of life for ourselves.
Let's do it, everybody. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, it's quite important, isn't it?
Understatement of the year, Nick.
Thank you so much, Amy, for taking time out of your very, very busy schedule to provide some of the Amy magic and the Amy purpose into our world. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Until next time, this is Nick Simon and Susan Heaton-Wright from the Superstar Communicator Podcast. Remember that you can download the notes from this podcast, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Take care.
Thank you for listening. You have been listening to the Superstar Communicator Podcast with your hosts, Nick Simon and Susan Heaton-Wright. If you like what we do, why not buy us a coffee on buyusacoffee.com/superstarcoms and subscribe to hear all our podcasts.